the American Civil War, a nation divided against itself. Brother fought brother, friend against friend, known as Bloody Bill to his enemies. Anderson was a Confederate guerrilla fighter who operated in the bloody borderlands between Missouri and Kansas. But how did a seemingly ordinary man transform into such a figure of dread? William T. Anderson was born between 1837 and 1839 in Hopkins County, Kentucky. His family, though not slaveholders, were ardent supporters of the Confederacy. The Anderson family moved to Missouri and later to Kansas, settling in Bleeding, Kansas. Anderson witnessed firsthand the brutality of this conflict, solidifying his allegiance to the South. The outbreak of the Civil War in 1861 provided an outlet for Anderson's simmering rage. The Anderson family, though united in their pro-slavery sentiment, was not immune to the divisions that plagued the nation. William's father instilled in him a deep sense of loyalty and a fierce temper. Young William longed for adventure, finding solace in the company of other restless youths. As William grew older, his escapades became more daring, and he developed a reputation as a troublemaker. Despite his flaws, William possessed a certain charisma that drew others to him. The outbreak of the Civil War in 1861 ignited the powder keg that was Bleeding, Kansas. For William Anderson, the war was an opportunity to unleash his rage. Anderson's early forays into the war were marked by both cowardice and brutality. He joined a band of Confederate guerrillas, men who operated outside the bounds of conventional warfare. Under their tutelage, Anderson learned the art of guerrilla warfare, mastering ambush and surprise attack. The collapse of the makeshift jail in Kansas City, resulting in the death of Anderson's sister, proved to be a turning point in his life. Consumed by grief and rage, Anderson vowed to avenge his sister's death. Anderson's transformation from a troubled youth into a ruthless killer was now complete. He embraced the moniker Bloody Bill, reveling in the terror it inspired in his enemies. Anderson's reign of terror spread across the Kansas-Missouri borderlands, leaving a trail of death and destruction. By 1860, the rumblings of secession and the specter of war hung heavy over the nation. Anderson, despite his young age, possessed a keen eye for profit amidst chaos. Initially, he acquired horses through legitimate means, but as the conflict deepened, so did his greed. Anderson turned to stealing, assembling a small band of like-minded individuals. The stolen horses, easily sold along the Santa Fe Trail, lined Anderson's pockets, fueling his ambition. As 1861 dawned, Anderson and his associate, Judge I.A. Baker, attempted to formalize their commitment to the Confederacy. However, their plans were cut short when they were apprehended by a Union patrol. Baker distanced himself from the Andersons, issuing a warrant for the arrest of William's brother Griffith. Enraged by Baker's actions, William confronted him, demanding the warrant's retraction. In a moment of fury, Baker drew his pistol, fatally shooting William's father. Now a fugitive, Anderson fled to Missouri, a haven for Confederate sympathizers. He joined forces with his brother Jim, forming a small band of outlaws. They targeted Union patrols and supply lines, their raids becoming increasingly audacious. Word of their exploits reached William Quantrill, a notorious guerrilla leader. Under Quantrill's tutelage, Anderson honed his skills as a guerrilla fighter. William Anderson, now a hardened outlaw, found himself drawn to the ranks of William Quantrill's raiders. Quantrill recognized Anderson's potential as a valuable asset. Anderson's ruthlessness and knowledge of the Missouri countryside made him a formidable guerrilla fighter. Upon joining Quantrill's raiders, Anderson quickly rose through the ranks. He participated in numerous raids, his brutality and ruthlessness becoming legendary. Anderson's first taste of large-scale violence as a Quantrill raider came with the raid on Westport, Missouri. Anderson played a key role in the operation, unleashing a torrent of violence. The raid solidified Anderson's reputation as a fearsome guerrilla fighter. Emboldened by the success in Westport, Quantrill led his raiders on a series of raids. Anderson, always at the forefront, reveled in the chaos, his bloodlust growing with each raid. As Anderson's experience grew, so did his notoriety. He earned the nickname Bloody Bill for his excessive violence. Anderson's actions became increasingly sadistic, his victims often subjected to torture. Some historians point to the psychological trauma of war as a reason for his brutality. Anderson had become a monster, a symbol of the darkest impulses unleashed by the Civil War. The jail collapse, resulting in the death of Anderson's sister Josephine, left him consumed by grief and rage. Anderson swore vengeance against the Union, blaming them for his sister's death. Anderson's thirst for vengeance knew no bounds, targeting Union soldiers and civilians alike. The borderlands between Missouri and Kansas trembled under Anderson's reign of terror. Anderson had become a force of nature, a whirlwind of death and destruction. The news of the Kansas City jail collapse, shattering his world and unleashing a tempest of grief and rage within him. The image of his sisters trapped within the collapsing structure, their cries for help swallowed by the dust and debris, seared itself onto his mind, a haunting vision that would forever fuel his thirst for vengeance. Dead, her life cut short by the callous indifference of the Union, or so he believed. Mary, his remaining sister, bore the physical and emotional scars of that horrific day, a constant reminder of the collapse of the jail, regardless of its cause, became a turning point in Anderson's life, the event that extinguished any flicker of humanity that may have remained within him. The war, once a distant became deeply personal, a blood feud against those he held responsible for his sister's death. The moniker, Bloody Bill, previously a whispered rumor, now became a self-fulfilling prophecy. Determination. He embraced the terror it inspired, wielding it as a weapon against his enemies, a symbol of the relentless fury that consumed him. The transformation of William Anderson from a ruthless guerrilla fighter into the embodiment of terror known as Bloody Bill was as swift as it was chilling. The death of his sister Josephine had shattered any remaining moral constraints, unleashing a torrent of rage and despair that found its outlet in acts of unspeakable cruelty. His raids, once characterized by their military precision and strategic brilliance, descended into orgies of violence, fueled by a desire for revenge that knew no bounds. Union soldiers, once viewed as adversaries, were now seen as legitimate targets for his wrath, their lives forfeit in his quest for retribution. He seemed to revel in the fear he instilled, his name whispered in hushed tones by terrified civilians and battle-hardened soldiers alike. His reputation as Bloody Bill preceded him, his legend growing with each passing raid, each act of brutality adding another layer to the mythos surrounding him. Anderson's methods of torture and mutilation became legendary, his cruelty knowing no bounds. Scalping, dismemberment, and desecration of corpses were common occurrences. His acts of savagery, designed to inflict not only physical pain, but also psychological trauma, to break the spirit of his enemies and leave an enduring mark of his vengeance. The town of Lawrence, Kansas, a haven for abolitionists, became the focal point for Anderson's fury. In August 1863, Anderson and his men descended upon the town, leaving a trail of death and destruction. The Lawrence massacre was a horrific display of unrestrained violence. Men and boys were dragged from their homes, their pleas for mercy ignored. Over 150 civilians were slaughtered, their bodies left to rot in the summer heat. The raid cemented Anderson's reputation as Bloody Bill. William T. Anderson, Bloody Bill to his enemies, left behind a legacy as complicated as it was horrific. He was a product of his time, twisted by the brutality of the Civil War. His story serves as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dehumanizing effects of war. Anderson's transformation illustrates the corrosive nature of vengeance. Despite the horrors, Anderson remains a figure of fascination, romanticized by some. The truth lies somewhere in between.